To continue in the Baal HaSulam. After all, the mitzvot were given only in order to purify people. This purification constitutes the refinement of the muddied body, which is the ultimate aim that results from the fulfillment of all the Torah and mitzvot. The Rebbe Shlita says, the muddied body does not refer to the physical body, but to the bodily portion of a person's soul, which is the desire to receive pleasure and joy. Refining the physical body or training the stomach is certainly not the issue here, but rather changing the person for whom the physical body is just an external wrapping. For example, learning to live with minimal food may just increase one's ego. Baal HaSulam insisted that the only measure of spiritual development is whether you seek to receive for yourself or you want to give to others. I've heard the Rebbe Shlita say that something as spiritual and as grand as the mitzvah of tefillin. We think tefillin is a mitzvah. It's a spiritual act, period. And eating, for example, though it can be spiritual, if I say a blessing on it before and afterwards, it can be spiritual, but generally speaking, maybe more raw, maybe more coarse, maybe more material. The novelty here is that it all depends on intention, meaning I can put on tefillin and it could be a completely material action. It can be completely physical and self-serving and be quite the opposite from spiritual. In contrast, I could do a very physical action and it could be spiritual, like eating food, making a blessing, being thankful to the Creator for providing such sustenance, such ability to consume and to enjoy, which is also powerful in the sense that there's a lot of practices out there, let alone asceticism and Eastern practices, that surely are focused on the body and self-improvement and self-love, and as one of the highest forms of the will to receive in spirituality, as opposed to cultivating the will to give. But even in Judaism and times of the past, and some still practice today, things like, fasting out of their own desire. They'll take on random fasts and things of this nature. But the point is here is that it just increases your ego, or it can, generally speaking. And if it does, then it's not worth it, simply put. Tov, one moment, I'm just going to close the window here. Baruch Hashem that there's kids who still play outside, play with balls and sticks and run around. In contrast to my life as a secular person in America, I myself being trapped in the web of video games and the internet, to appreciate the religious community whose children are so natural in their enjoyment. They can really get by a whole day of playing with a stick and a ball. In contrast to 2 or 3-year-olds that have tablets as babysitters. There's spiritual roots to everything. So to imagine and contemplate the depth of this type of education versus that, neither being perfect, but it's a bitter contrast. The Baal HaSulam continues, quote, a person is born a wild young donkey, from Eov 11:12, or Job. For from the moment that a person emerges and is born from the bosom of creation, a newborn, the newborn is in a state of utmost contamination and degradation. This state is defined by the exceedingly great degree of self-love that is imprinted in us, for all our movements are compelled to pivot around this self-regard without the slightest spark of altruism. In this way, we are distant as can be from the root, completely at the opposite extreme. The root is entirely giving without even the slightest spark of receiving, whereas the newborn, that is the created being, us, is entirely in a state of receiving for itself without any spark of giving at all. Therefore, its position is discerned to be at the bottom point of lowliness and contamination to be found in our human realm. You could say, but Adam Yitzchak, I give. I enjoy to give. Amazing. Thank God. But those who have passed the threshold and come into the state of giving to give, it's hard to come by. It takes a lot of work. And it's possible for all of us. That's why we're here. But generally speaking, most of us are under that threshold and are either in receiving to receive or giving to receive. It can be a lot of pleasure to give, but the root of the desire is still receiving. As we learned recently, in fact, all of our desires are coming from the desire to receive. That is our raw material. At some point, we do gain a second nature, and we can rise above that initial nature. But the Rebbe Shita says, on this point of our position and having to discern it as the lowliest and most contaminated found in the human realm, the Rebbe Shita says, each of us needs to get to the realization that the words written here apply to him or her. That his or her condition is at the lowliest point of contamination in all of human existence. Until we get to feel that this is so, we cannot develop and advance from the level of an animal to the level of a person. It's like a person who's invited to take a trip and imagines climbing mountains and crossing rivers. But only when he or she actually tries to do those things does he become apparent how unprepared he or she is. Similarly, until we attempt to take the path of selfless giving, we don't realize how completely lowly and contaminated we are. For only then do we see that every move we make, without exception, revolves around the pivotal point of our desire to receive without even a tiny spark of a true desire to give. This is a most bitter point, and it's the most bittersweet point. It's specifically from contemplating the fact and reality of these words, as the Rebbe Shita says, that we build the vessel, we feel are lacking, we understand and contemplate how far we actually are from our root. This lack is a vessel that will be filled with the light of the Creator. This lack is specifically the place that we can raise true prayer. If everything's great and there's no lack in life, the words that you speak to the Creator are not necessarily prayer, generally not. They might be praise, they might be thanks, surely. But prayer is something to fulfill a lack. So instead of saying, good luck, what we really need, as I heard from my teacher, Rav Nachum Levi, we need a good lack. So we should wish each other a good lack. We should actually pray, as the Rebbe Shlita says. We should pray for the correct lack. We should pray for the correct desire to feel the lack, and therefore pray for the desire to give. Because it's only from that place of lack can we do the work. Even as I say this, my insides are like battling this. It's such a difficult point to contemplate. But I can only stress it so much. One should meditate and contemplate it themselves and realize that there's really no other way other than suffering. There's two basic paths, as we've spoken about in the past. There's the path of suffering and the path of light, or the path of Torah and mitzvot, in other words. This includes the path of Torah and mitzvot. It's very much in line with Torah and mitzvot to reflect on oneself, to make a cheshbon nefesh, an accounting of the soul, to ask oneself, where am I holding? Where are my intentions? When I did this or that today, was I giving? Was I loving? Did I have emunah? Did I have faith? Did I believe that everything was for the best? Where am I? What do I desire? These cultivate true lacks, good lacks, which, by definition, equate to great fulfillment. So much so that at some point we refine ourselves to be happy with the lack. Every lack that the Creator reveals within our consciousness as we look for it. Just like we look for the chametz, we look for the bread before Passover. We're looking in the nooks and crannies for our ego. We're looking for these wills to receive within ourselves in order to rid ourselves of our ego. To rid ourselves of the swollenness, the leaven, the bread. We want to be thin and humble like matzah. Tov, B'ezrat Hashem, with Hashem's help, slowly but surely, as we continue this learning and connect to these tools, and hopefully connect to a true rabbi, we'll have the means to reach our intended purpose, and hopefully help others as well along the way. The essay after Matan Torah, which is what we're currently in, is called Arvut. Maybe we'll continue and learn there after we're done with this one. Arvut is mutual guarantee. In short, we're all in the same boat because we're all one soul. All the best. Till next time.